do that. Good morning. It is Friday, November 26th, Isru Chag, Thanksgiving, the 22nd of Kislev. We are in the final countdown to Hanukkah, and we're studying the Talmud, the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Masechet Shabbat, chapter 10, Tzadik Aleph, Amud Beis 91b. I think we can officially declare ourselves through 180 pages, single side pages. Mark will correct me if I'm still missing, but I think we're just about there. A great accomplishment, a testament to the devotion of this Chabura to Torah, to our heritage, to our how do you call it? To our morasha, to our inheritance. And so let us continue. We're starting a new Mishnah. I just want to begin. We'll mention a prayerful wish for complete and speedy recovery for all those that are in need. And we'll particularly dedicate our learning for the following names: Leah Bas Rita, Malka Bas Rivka, Chaim Baruch Eliezer ben Rusa Esther, and Lila Nishmas, Daniel Yerachmiel ben Gedalia, and all of the members of our Chabura, their loved ones, and their friends and family, and all of Klal Yisrael should be blessed only with good health, happy circumstances, and all good things in between. I'm going to share the screen, and together we will wade our way through a new Mishnah in the 10th chapter of Masechet Shabbat. As you may recall, yesterday we spoke about different hypotheticals or variations of carrying something when its status evolves from the beginning to the end. Most particularly, yesterday we talked about again, we're not going to continue that discussion. We finish it. I just want to refresh your memory. We spoke about that little piece of bread or a little piece of food rather, that's usually insignificant because it is so small. Upon landing, it makes a big halachic impact. It makes a big halachic splash beyond its weight, beyond its size, because it fuses with other foodstuffs and creates a scenario of problematic conveyance of impurity. A halachic fact happens from this little piece of bread. The Gemara asked, so now that being that this item upon descent, when it lands, is impactful, is significant, do we look at that item as having been significant from the moment it was airborne till the moment it landed? The Gemara leaves off with uncertainty, and that uncertainty, the lack of resolution, is reflected halachically when the Rambam paskins. The Rambam leaves it with a doubt, and that is yesterday's Gemara. Today we're going to begin a new Mishnah, and we're going to talk about other facets of Hotza'ah. I have a confession to make, which is Baruch Hashem, we've been very busy with wonderful things, Hanukkah and other exciting developments. So we're going to learn this Mishnah together. It's been a while since I reviewed it, so I'll ask for your additional indulgence and assistance as we go through this Mishnah. Hamoitzi. So again, now we're off the specific topic of volume or less than volume, but activated chashivas based on another interest, desire, or intended use. And now we're going to talk about a more general discussion about carrying on Shabbos. In a sense, we could say that this Gemara, in many ways, is picking up from the beginning of Masechet Shabbat, where we talked about different reshuyot and different ways that carrying can happen. Let's see them. If a person is carrying food, and he places the foodstuffs from his house onto the askufa, onto the threshold, whether he then goes on to carry it outside, whether he carries it outside, meaning it's now on the threshold. The threshold, of course, is the part of the door that's between inside and outside. He carries it outside. If you want to daven, you can daven Gesundheit. You can daven here Gesundheit. Feel at home. And 5 o'clock we mincha erev Shabbos. 8 a.m. with masks, 10 a.m. flexible. Look forward to seeing you. All right. Whether he goes back and carries it outside, or if somebody else comes and carries it outside. Pator, this is not considered a biblical act of carrying. Why? Surely we must acknowledge that the item went from point A to point B Point A being a Rishus HaYachid, point B being a Rishus HaRabim. We know that carrying is bringing or transporting an item from point A to point B, assuming it is chashuv, assuming it is something of significance and substance, the right volume or the right machshava. Well, you did it, so why should you be pater? So the Mishnah gives the answer. Because when he carried the item from point A to point B, it was not in a single fluid action. It wasn't in one moment. It wasn't bivas achas. Dr. Stamler, how would we translate? How would you translate? Sorry?
Also, let me ask this. Since it's on the threshold, it's nishtaher and nishtahin. It's not maybe not a Reshut HaYachid and not a Reshut HaRabim.
Okay.
So maybe that's why it's patur.
So very good. As a matter of fact, if you look at Rashi here, I think you were mechaven to Rashi, and the good news is that Rashi was really giving us a clue to the Gemara. So you're mamish aligned over here. The Gemara Mukila. The Gemara is going to explain, and by the way, your question is such a burning question. Rashi is not going to leave us in suspense till we get to the Gemara. He gives us the alert right away. Our Gemara explained, we're talking about Ba'askufa, Carmelis. This threshold has the halachic classification of a Carmelis. A Carmelis, Reb Beryl, were you with us when we did the beginning of Masechah Shabbos?
Which part?
First parak, were you there?
I don't think so.
No. So, Mark, do you remember what did we say? What's a Carmelis?
Carmelis is a quasi between Reshus HaRabim and Reshus HaYachid.
Nishtahin, nishtaher. It's not a Reshus HaYachid. It's not a Reshus HaRabim. It has its own classification.
Limbo in English.
It's a kind of, I don't know if we're going to call it a limbo, but it's its own Reshus. That's not Reshus HaYachid, not Reshus HaRabim. And biblically, there is absolutely no problem to carry from a Reshus HaRabim to a Carmelis or from a Reshus HaYachid to a Carmelis. So once Rashi takes the wind out of our sails and expresses to us what Rebbe Nachum is trying to say. Rebbe Nachum, what did you say again?
That it's why wouldn't it be patur? Because of the reasons that it's.
He said nishtahin, nishtaher. That was perfect.
Dr. Stamler said something very much like it's a Carmelis. He said it in his own words, but he essentially said ostensibly it's in a third party, or it's in another Reshus HaYachid, not a Reshus HaRabim, and so therefore you don't have this fluid, seamless carrying from point A to point B. Point A, you don't have a seamless carrying from Reshus HaYachid, to Reshus HaRabim, which is prohibited. But let's see what the Mishnah says first. This did not happen in a single fluid motion. Dr. Stamler, is that a good explanation for Bivas Achas?
Yeah.
So Rabbi Steinsaltz here says all at once. I think that's the same. Let's see Rashi, Bivas Achas. Akira mimakem chiyuv. You don't have a act of picking up, of uprooting mimakem chiyuv from a place that would cause one to be liable for carrying. V'hanacha b'makem chiyuv, and placement in a place that would have you being chayiv. So then havale akira mimakem chayiv, v'hanacha b'makem patur. Here, what's happening is you have akira mimakem chiyuv. You picked it up from a place that you could technically be liable for carrying. But the placement, you placed it down b'makem patur. You placed it in a place that you are biblically exempt from carrying. And then in a second series of actions, you picked it up and placed it down. And therefore, the Mishnah explains you are not chayiv. If one would seamlessly and fluidly carry from point A to point B, while by passing through or over a Carmelis, it is plausible, we'll discuss, that you would be chayiv. But if you stopped in middle, you've essentially done to carry. You have to do akira, pick up, hanacha, place down, both in zones that are prohibited. If in the interim you took a rest and you place it down in a Carmelis, one has not carried.
Rabbi,
yes.
What if you did both in this neutral spot?
What do you mean?
You picked up and you put down in this place, which is
well, ostensibly you did. If you pick something up, you probably put it down previously, or someone put it down. So we're talking about that a person placed it down, and then he picked it up. But because the item was resting on its own, the moment the item is out of your hands and it's in a resting position, you're not currently carrying it. You're not currently transporting it. And so the act of carrying is missing, has ceased.
No, but
again,
in that zone, he could pick something up from the ground, pick it up, look at it, and then even if he put it down. right
Plausibly,
away
he
or
could.
not?
Yeah. You could do that. You
Okay.
could do that. All right, let's see another halach. Kupa shimalaya peiros. Now, let's say you have a basket full of fruits. Unisana alaskufa chitzoina, and it's placed on the outer threshold. Without getting a picture or giving a definition yet, let's see Rabbi Steinsaltz explains. It's considered, we had this also in the first parak. It's in the public domain. And so the askufa chitzoina is considered part of the Rishus Hashanah. So maybe you'll say, the basket of fruits extends into an area that's part of the Rishus Harabim. Even though the bulk of the fruits in the basket are in the part that's considered a Rishus Harabim. So maybe you took it from the Rishus HaYachid. You placed it down mostly in a Rishus Harabim. Potter ad sheyoitzi es kol akupa. He is yet exempt biblically from having carried from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus Harabim, being that a share, a part of this basket is yet in the Rishus HaYachid. Let's see Rashi. Koloimar. Ella imkein hoitzi barishoina kol hakupa. He would only be chayiv if in one single fluid motion he placed the entire basket. Might we say in one fell swoop? Is that such a thing? It has to be placed into the Rishus Harabim. If you're feeling confused, fear not. Rashi lets us know that the Gemara is going to give us a considerable additional analysis and explanation so we can make sense of this Mishnah. So this Mishnah, I think, in a sense, one might say, plays the role of what some of our members of the Chabura accused previous Mishnahs of doing. It informed us of something that might be nominally akin to a heter of sorts. I'm not embracing this perspective, but it's a kind of heter. It's telling you that there is a way to get something moving without biblically transgressing carrying on Shabbos. Now, an important reminder, when the Mishnah says pater means you are not going to get skila if you're warned. That's stoning. If you did it inadvertently, you might not have to bring a chatos for doing a biblical sin unintentionally. That doesn't mean one should do so. Chachamim do not, and Jewish law halacha does not permit such an act. But the Torah, the halacha, the Mishnah has one of its essential roles in this topic, and in general, is to ascertain if the prohibition is midaraisa from the Torah or only a prohibition midrabanan. And there are other ramifications. There are occasional scenarios where perhaps one would be advised to do it in a way that's derabanan. I don't want to go there now because I think we'll have better source material going forward. So again, you've picked up a basket, you've taken it from a private domain, and you've placed it into a twilight zone, into a zone that's partially neutral, partially carmelist, partially external, partially outside, and one isn't chayiv until the entire basket, until the entire item is placed down in the public domain. I believe that's what we're saying. So again, this is one of those Gemaras that have many, many, many different interpretations. Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation, who is the way we explained, is consistent with a number of the Rishonim who explain this Gemara, and we'll see some more. But again, I think we can be comfortable with this interpretation. There is the askufa, which is generally considered a carmelist, and there's a segment of the threshold that is considered part of the Rosh Hashanah. Now, I think we should point out that it is most likely the case that a threshold in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara was not exactly like the way our buildings are constructed. For starters, our doorways and our doors are quite thin. And they're also pretty light, I think we can agree. Whereas if we read of ancient, if we go to any archaeological site, and you don't have to travel far, maybe you went to Eretz Yisrael, and you saw ancient structures, the time of the Mishnah, or even Byzantine, Israel, we'll find that the structures were made of stones, very thick walls, and the doorways were also a considerable space. And so if there was some kind of structure, or there was some kind of elevated point on the ground floor, on the floor rather, there's a lot more room to play around, and most likely that is what we are describing over here. You have a considerable sized threshold, and so a lot of stuff could be happening in those thresholds, as opposed to our thresholds. I'm looking right now at the threshold that leads between the old sanctuary and the deck sanctuary, as we call sanctuary B, and it's probably all of a tefach or two, a few inches wide, and there's a little elevation, but not much is happening there. So let's see if our Gemara is going to give us a little more information about this, the two scenarios of our Mishnah. Again, I would say the single theme of our Mishnah is askufa, thresholds make things complicated. Now, complicated isn't always problem. It might actually introduce leniency, but it introduces complexity in our halachic discussion. So let's take a look at the Gemara. Let's see the first Mishnah. Hi, askufa. Let's figure out what does askufa mean? What is the halachic story of an askufa? And what is the halachic story of the askufa that is highlighted in our Mishnah? So, hi askufa, the askufa of our Mishnah, what is it considered? What is its details? Ilema askufa reshus harabim. Maybe you'll suppose the status of an askufa of a threshold is to be part of the public domain. But if that's the case, that cannot be, because pater, would that scenario be pater? Rashi. Now, Rashi does some important essential information. Rashi explains. How would a threshold be considered a reshus harabim? Kigoin gevoy hates. For example, if it is 9 tefachim high, b'rachav arba, and it is 4 tefachim wide, b'rabbe mekatven olav, and the folks who are walking on in the streets use this slightly elevated curve, an extended curve, to adjust their packages. Again, if you're with us for the first chapter of Masechah Shabbos, you may recall this. The chazia l'rabim l'chsufi, and the public domain, the public people in the public thoroughfare, people that are in the reshus harabim, are able to utilize these thresholds to service them. So Rashi gives us some explanation. So obviously, just with that, we can imagine that our askufa here is not quite like the askufa that you have going into your door from your hallway into your apartment, or from the sanctuary A to sanctuary B, or any other threshold that we typically use. So again, let's go back to the Gemara. Let's figure out the askufas. If it has the criteria to be a reshus harabim, you're not pater. Why? Because then you have a simple carrying. You're transporting an item from point A, reshus hayachid, point B, reshus harabim. That's a classic instance of carrying. Ella askufa reshus hayachid. Rather, let's imagine that our askufa is a full-fledged reshus hayachid. How can a threshold be a full-fledged reshus hayachid? Well, as you may recall, and Rashi is going to fill us in the details in short, there are specific criteria. There are specific dimensions that would define a zone, a space, to be either a reshus hayachid or a reshus harabim. What are the criteria that would separate this askufa to be its own domain, reshus hayachid? Rashi, for example, gevoy hayud, if it had the height of 10 tefachim, pardon me, gevoy hayud, if it had 10 tefachim of height, v'dalit, ki chazar v'tzia, l'chayiv de'ikakir reshus hayachid v'nachar reshus harabim. If the askufa has the dimensions of a reshus hayachid, now, the first time you carry it from your house to there, no problem. Reshus hayachid, reshus hayachid. That's not carrying. The second time you pick it up from the askufa, you place it into the reshus harabim. You've now done a full-fledged act of carrying from point A to point B, from a Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. So let me just back up for a moment. Let's zoom out. The laws of Shabbos are as follows. You mustn't carry unless there's an Erev, but then you're not carrying. Where can't you carry? You can't carry from a Rishus HaYachid, a private domain, into Rishus HaRabim, which is a public domain. You also can't transport an item for Amis in a Rishus HaRabim, in a public domain.
Rabbi,
Yes.
in the real world,
Mhm.
it would appear to me that it was treated as Rishus HaYachid because the people left the milk for the customer on the doorstep and other things.
Well, Ribeiro, what we're saying, what our Gemara, you're right. And what our Gemara is saying is that there are different types of thresholds. There's the threshold where your milkman left the milk there. But there's also the threshold that your milkman wouldn't dare leave the milk there because it's considered part of the public domain and someone's going to snatch it. And so right now we've used a word that's ambiguous. Threshold. Now to us, it's not ambiguous because we have a very precise we imagine quite precisely what a threshold looks like to us.
Yeah, but it was very simple. No money was left, just the little tickets and the empty
I'm
bottles.
saying in those
et cetera,
in the time of the Mishnah, which is the text that we are studying.
I'm not that old.
You don't even have to go to the milk. Today, Amazon leaves you packages all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
And there's an issue of packages disappearing too, right?
Yep.
So it's a prevalent. It's a common. It's a pretty common issue, especially in areas of relative crime. We can ask our friends from New York, certain parts of Brooklyn, that have a considerable struggle with this. Hang on just one more second. One second.
What the police did in some neighborhoods, they put out empty packages on people's curb, and then placed detectives in the area. And when they saw somebody just coming in off the street and picking up those packages, they got arrested.
Well, that was the joke during the garbage strike in New York. The guy put a gift wrap thing in his car, was stolen every day.
Yeah, I saw also they had investigators that did the same thing where they put some kind of dye in the box. And so when you open the box, there was a tracker, there was like a GPS tracker so they could follow where the box ends up. And then when he opens it, dye explodes, kind of like, they have they have, I think in the banks, they have exploding
The banks.
Yeah. And so they were able to catch. But anyways, but again, back to our story. We use the word threshold. We have to remember that things might have changed a bit over 2,000, 2,100 years. Just like currencies evolved a little bit. And just like what else has changed? A few other things have changed in the passage of time. Most things haven't changed. Well, I'll say this. I think human nature hasn't changed that much. Everything else is considerably different. So again, our Gemara is saying, what's the halachic status of the askufa? Now, the Gemara is clear with us. The halachic status of the askufa depends on its dimensions. So if it's a Rishus HaRabim or a Rishus HaYachid, we cannot say that the person is patur for having a fragmented act of carrying that's broken up, because it's not broken up. Either act A is carrying or the second act is carrying. And so obviously that cannot be what our mission is talking about. Rishus HaYachid, if the threshold has the status of Rishus HaYachid based on its dimensions, bein shechazar, on whether the person carried it from the threshold to the Rishus HaRabim, bein shehaitzi achar, if another person snatched it, patur. Hakam afik Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim. How can you be exempt from a proper act of carrying from a Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim? Now we all know the answer because we read Rashi, right? Ella, rather, what must we conclude? Ella, askufa karmelis. We're talking about an askufa that has the halachic status of a karmelis. How might a askufa, a threshold, have the halachic status of a karmelis? Well, there are specific dimensions that would allow an askufa to be a karmelis. What are those dimensions? Rashi tells us if it is 3 to 9 tvachim, or 3 and 8 points, whatever, 8 and a fraction. That's what v'lo tas b'chlal. The Edom Akira, it's not covered. V'rochava Dalid, and it is 4 tefachim wide. So there's a way that a Carmelist can be, an Askufa can be neither Rosh Hashayachid nor a Rosh Hashanah. And if it is neither Rosh Hashayachid or Rosh Hashanah, and you place the item you're carrying down the middle, then you may avoid biblical carrying. But Kamash Malan, the Chiddush of our Mishnah is, Taima, why are you exempt? Dinach be Carmelis, because you actively placed the item down on the Carmelis. Haloinach be Carmelis, but if you just passed through a Carmelis without stopping, Mechayiv, you're still Chayiv. So again, we're saying a big Chiddush. Our Mishnah is teaching us a big Chiddush. What's the Chiddush? We know carrying is to move something from a public to a private or a private to public domain. That's simple. That we all know. What if you pass through a different kind of airspace? What if you pass through a different kind of halachic space? A halachic space that technically, if you would stop now and place it down, or maybe stop now in a way that's considered placing it down, you're not chayiv. So do we say that because something changed in the journey, you're exempt? And by the way, now that we're thinking about it, now we're reading the Mishnah, this is something in common with our previous discussion, right? Previously, we talked about something that the item changed mid-flight or mid-carry. Either its dimensions changed or the machshava changed. Now we're talking about the item remained the same, the person remains the same, but his road from public to private or private to public domain runs through some funky space. It's a Carmelist kind of space. And we might think that because you didn't go directly from one domain to the other, but you passed through an area that would leave you biblically exempt, you should be off the hook. Kamash Malon. Therefore, our Mishnah teaches us a chiddush that until you place it down, you are not exempt. Rashi, although you pass the item that you are carrying through a Carmelis, we do not hold that we could view a person that is walking as if he has stopped. We don't say we don't say your step into a Carmelis is as if you landed and your item landed. Now, I don't know if you're having positive or negative flashbacks, but I want to remind you of various conversations we had about throwing a ball from the window of the Taramina to the Malaga, or from the Lamer to the Malaga. And we talked about how the ball might pass from one domain to another domain. So it's another discussion we had a long while ago. It's all recorded, I believe. But suffice it to say, when the person himself is moving from point A to point B through an intermediate zone, a zone that if you would stop, you're not chayiv, you are yet chayiv, says our Mishnah. Does everybody agree? Professor, are you there?
Yes.
Do you agree? If you move an item from point A to point B, but you pass through an intermediate zone, what's it called? A demilitarized, not a demilitarized, but a area that doesn't cause you to be a carry. It's not a problem to carry. Shabbos. What is it called?
No man's land.
You pass through a no man's land, a halachic no man's land.
No, the Carmelite is not a no man. It's more like everybody's place.
Okay, but it's a halachically ambiguous space. So should walk
has a special status, which makes things more complex.
Yeah, which allows us to have this conversation. So our Mishnah clearly said.
But
our Mishnah
some no man's land are defined by people like Putin.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, generally speaking, no man's land is trouble. Whereas a neutral zone, you'd rather be in Switzerland than in the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. I'll say that.
Right.
So we have to figure out what a Carmelis is. But anyways,
but he actually, if he actually stops in the Carmelis and long enough, then he's not chayav from going.
Yeah,
right.
If he stops in the Carmelis in a manner that's considered a hanacha, then he might not be chayav. So here we're talking about that he did not stop in such a manner that it's.
What we have to hear today is actually a Carmelite, not a Rishus Rabbah.
What is?
You know, the area where we are.
Oh, the zone that's within the Erev, you're saying.
Because you can't make you can only do an Erev for the Rabban, and you can't do an Erev true Rishus.
Correct. And that's why, depending on how you define Rosh Hashanah, there are opinions that are more or less inclined to allow an Erev. A lot of that has to do with how to classify the zone wherein the Erev is being applied. And that's a complicated sugya. We touched upon it a little bit. I think we're going to talk about it again. So I just want to give away the spoiler over here. Masnisin deloka ben Azai. Not everybody agrees. Our Mishnah actually is does not agree with Ben Azai. Why? What does Ben Azai say? The Tanya. We have a brayso that teaches as follows. Hamoitzi machanois leplatya. If you carry out stuff, remember this? I'm going to read Rabbi Steinsaltz's translation, and then we'll try to we'll upload our memories here. One who carries from a store to a plaza. Remember, we took pictures. We posted pictures of a marketplace that was uncovered in. You here for Shabbos? Yes. Okay, so there's an Erev here, yeah. We talked about we looked at pictures of Roman marketplaces, and we spoke of how one might carry from a store into the square. So we said, you carry something from the store, the Rishus HaYachid, into the square, which is a Rishus HaRabim, derech stav, but you go through the area that's enclosed with the colonnade.
It's like the Cardo and Yerushalayim.
Right. Oh, he even calls it a colonnade. Wow. So you carry it from the store to the public square, through the area that's like a colonnade. It's an covered walking space, or the area that you kind of can interact with the storekeepers. Derech stav, so through the colonnade. Chayiv, the Mishnah says the Brisa, the Tanakama says you're liable for carrying, because ultimately you transported an item seamlessly from point A to point B. Ben Azai says, no, you are exempt. Why are you exempt? Because the stav, the colonnade area, is considered a Carmelis. It's not an enclosure that has the status of a Rishus HaYachid. It's not a public domain that has the status of a Rishus HaRabim. And therefore, the fact that you passed it through there causes one to be chayiv. Rashi. Mechanus, Rishus HaYachid. The store is considered Rishus HaYachid. Rashi lets us know. Pilatia, the plaza, Rishus HaRabim. Stav, Mukayv etz device. Leishiv. It's the area that's enclosed or covered for one to sit. It's blocked off so people could sit there. It's exposed to the public, but it's not a seamless process. Let's look briefly. I hope we'll be successful. What do I want to call it? A Roman? Give me the right words to Google.
Viaduct, maybe. No.
Market.
Place. How do you spell colonnades? How do you spell colonnades?
Collonade.
Okay, we got it right. Baruch Hashem. Let's look at Google Images. We'll pray we have something that gives us some kind of. There's discussion on the Beis Hamikdash on the Har Bayis when Herod rebuilt or expanded the Beis Hamikdash. So he also employed the design of a stav, lifnimi stav. He built colonnades, and I'm just looking. All of these pictures can convey the idea somewhat, but it's not perfect the way we've seen it in some of the other. Oh, I know, because we found them in Pompeii, right? Because that's where it's kind of preserved. Pompeii.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yes. Let's see.
Why don't you try the Cardo in Yerushalayim?
You know what? You're right. Let's do that. Cardo. How do we spell Cardo?
That's it. Cardo.
Boom. Okay, beautiful. Shkoyach. So let us take because that's exactly, or I think exactly what we're describing. So here, let's just pull up this picture. Open in a new image, a new tab, and let's just look for one other picture. See, this is currently how you can view it. This is actually here. Okay, the picture is a little bit blurry, a little fuzzy, but I think it actually portrays perfectly what we're talking about. You see the screen? I know it's blurry, but what we see here is pillars with an overhang. And then here is the public thoroughfare, very busy. The people really are in the stores. They bring their wares out into this intermediate zone where they might be sitting and selling the storage, or they might have slept inside over here. And here's the public domain. So the public people walk through here. They go or they interact in this intermediate zone. And then the private domain is on the inside. And so what we're describing is if a person goes into the storehouse or the office or whatever you want to call the store, and then they carried it through this space over here where the columns operate into the public domain. So Ben Azai says you're potter and the Mishnah says you're chayiv. Let's just do one other picture. Okay, it's very small. Let's see if we can zoom in. This is the cardo today. If you go right over here, you're not far from the Kaisel. And there's also Chabad of the cardo right over here. When you take the steps that go down and you start your initial descent, your final descent to the Kaisel, right on your left-hand side, there's the Tzemach Tzedek Shul, if I recall. You can't blame him, a Chabadnik. Of course not, it's going to stick out of my memory. And so you have Chabad of the cardo, which is like a storefront that's on the side. Then you have the Tzemach Tzedek Shul, which has a big distinction. It's unfortunately the oldest standing remaining shul in Jerusalem because the Jordanians destroyed almost all of the shuls, and somehow miraculously it's one of the shuls. Probably wasn't the most remarkable shul, but it remains. There's a plaque in there dedicated to this, I believe it's the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, whose disciples were involved in the shul. But there's a plaque thinking, I know this is totally off topic, thinking, I don't remember now which of the big families, it might have been the Sassoon family from Bombay, who I think funded the construction of the shul. So it's an interesting convergence of different influences in a single structure. And the reason why I'm pointing this out really is because until very recently, if you'd go into that shul on Shabbos, you would have the privilege of davening with Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Evan Yisrael. His memory should be a blessing, but that was where he would daven, so right near the cardo. But now back to our topic over here. This is a similar idea. Now, Reb Menachem, I'm actually not even sure which side was the public part and which side was the private part because it's ruins. What I imagine is that the road, I don't know if you can see my cursor, ran over here where the stairs are. This must have been enclosed, and here must have been the stores that were totally closed. Of course, they've mostly been destroyed, but this is, I believe, what we're talking about. So it does portray. Let's look for one more picture of the cardo reimagined. Well, I guess this picture is really a good picture. Oh, here. Let's see if this picture helps us out at all. So here you have somebody standing. Oh, you have someone standing right over here looking down. It's blurry. And so here is the same cardo, different angle. And here is an image of how it must have been. So what they're portraying here, blurry image, is that actually the colonnades would have been on both sides. So there were stores on both sides. And then in the middle would have been the public thoroughfare. Either way, that's approximately what our Mishnah is talking about. And Shkoyach Rebbe Nachem for accurately identifying the right kind of thing to look for. Shlomi Shabbat Shalom. So that concludes the analysis of the first segment of our new Mishnah. You know what, folks? I think I'm going to, I think we're going to stop over here just a few minutes early.
Rabbi, I have a shaila for you.
Go ahead, please.
I bought a challah yesterday. It has a label, not Yoshon. Something to do with Shemitah?
I'm going to hit pause before I give you any. Hold on one second.
Okay. I ate the challah anyway, not to worry.
It is. Okay. I hit recording again. My dear friends, this concludes today's Gemara. We've just started a new Mishnah. We've introduced the notion of an askufa, of a threshold. A threshold sounds like a very innocuous and boring item, but as we found out, there are many varieties, and there's great halachic variability about what you can and can't place, or if you can place on a threshold, or actually more accurately, if the threshold ultimately gives you some kind of heter, some kind of leniency from, or at least avoidance of a biblical act of carrying. A lot of variables are in play, particularly the variables that pertain to the dimensions of the askufa And probably the best thing would be not to carry from your house to outside if there's no Eruv, and to rely on these kind of heterim. It's not even a heter. It's just if a person did it already, it helps them identify what has been done and what has not been done. That concludes today's Gemara. I want to end off with a piece of good, exciting news. Dr. Hammer, you know about this, but I want to share it with everyone. For the past 6 years, whenever a visitor comes to town, they have good. First of all, I'm happy to hear advice. But visitors particularly always have even better advice and better insights than the locals. They know exactly what we should do. And Baruch Hashem. And so whenever a visitor comes to town that's particularly close or concerned about our shul, they say, Rabbi, you really need to see about buying the bank drive-through and the lot that's across the street. And I tell them, wow, I'm so happy you came to tell me that because we never would have otherwise considered that idea. Well, the truth of the matter is, of course, that we've tried many times. The owners are quite quirky, idiosyncratic, and had some crazy ideas about what they wanted from and for that piece of land. And so we've been planning, Mirz Hashem, a long time about building a beautiful new shul. Our community deserves something that's going to be the pride and joy for any Jew that lives or visits or just walks past the shul. And we wrote off owning that property because they were not very interested in playing ball and they wanted many, many millions of dollars. Sometimes things happen in Hashem's time frame, as much as we want it to happen in our time frame. And I'll confess, I'm a kind of person who sometimes want things to happen in the way I want it. But the reality is that Hashem is the one that calls the shots, and everything happens on Hashem's time frame. And in a miraculous and unanticipated way, the ownership, it's a little more complicated now. We reached out to them about possibly renting the land for a short term. The ownership said, no way, we're not interested, but make us an offer. And Hashem put the right shluchim in the right place, and someone made a very lowball offer on behalf of the shul, not expecting a positive response, but we got a positive response. With Hashem's help, we hope to be able to purchase the land right across the street from the shul. And that's a very wonderful thing for so many reasons. Number one, assuming we stay the course, it's a place to put the shul during construction. It's a place for Jews who want to come and park their cars. And it's a place for the community to dream about what happens after tomorrow. It strongly asserts our influence and imprint on the block and in the neighborhood. And also in a Sor Meirah kind of way, it avoids the possibility of a nightclub opening there or a tattoo parlor or some kind of Greek, I don't know. So it's a wonderful, wonderful news. It opens up many, many big and wondrous opportunities for the shul and for the community as far as the way we can serve the Jewish people. And as the community expands and people are looking to move to Florida, Mirz Hashem places our community even more solidly on the map. So that's the great news. Now, of course, every piece of good news comes with a campaign. And so with Hashem's help, I haven't announced this publicly, but you're part of the Gemara Chabur, you're the insiders. And so in order to buy the land and to prep it and be ready to move on to even more exciting and bigger and better steps, we'll be announcing Mirz Hashem over Shabbos and then in an email, hopefully Sunday or Monday, a $1 million campaign. $1 million campaign to raise $1 million to pay to buy for the land and to put it into immediate usable condition, and so that we can seamlessly move on to make sure that the community has more space and higher quality and more pride and ability to have simchas and many, many wonderful things. So Mirz Hashem, look out, we're going to have a $1 million matching campaign. So it means that we need to raise, Mirz Hashem will need to raise an additional $500,000. We're confirming some of our final matching donors, and if anybody here would like to was sitting on some appreciated stock, and your accountant told you the best thing to do is to donate it, the shul's able to. I'd like to invite you first before anyone else hears this. We have the ability to receive those stock, and it might actually be good for your accounting. But I can't give you accounting advice. But you might want to ask your accountant, and you have an ability to make a massive impact for the shul. So I want to let you all know first. I hope you'll share my sentiment. This is massive, unexpected news. It's kind of like a Hanukkah miracle. That's how I see it. And Mirz Hashem.
We can consider the donations Hanukkah geld.
If you're thinking of giving Hanukkah geld, you can consider it Hanukkah geld. My hope is that by the end of Hanukkah, we'll be able to reach our goal of $1 million. Some of it will probably be pledges because some donors told me they have to do half in December and half in January. And if we reach our goal, I want to invite you all. We're going to get chain cutters. We'll close and we'll chop the chains that are taunting us every time you want to park by the shul, and we'll be able to celebrate and on to bigger and better things. So I didn't share it with the community, but I wanted to share it first things first with our dear members of our Chabura. And
How many square feet compared to what we have already?
the property is 14,000 square feet, which means it is double plus a third. So it's actually a larger lot. There's a lot of different cheshbonot. There's a lot of different architectural and legal, and
Over there. 'Cause
there
it's
are a
bigger, right?
variety of considerations that are now made available. And the experts will give us their assessment, and then Amir Hashem.
We have a place to be.
Yeah, but the main thing is this is a massive.
It's bigger than we have.
It's a massive development, and I'm happy to share it with you first. And we should always have beautiful miracles and blessings. I'll tell you this: the sale price, according to most estimates, is $1 million under what it probably should be. So we're already starting at a beautiful. So Baruch Hashem.
Definitely had a hand in there, for sure.
So I wanted to end off. We're going to Shabbos. I want to end off in good news and happy news, and Hashem should answer everyone's prayers for health and happiness, nachas. And I hope Hashem answers my prayer too, that everyone will be as excited as I am, and we'll together hopefully we'll reach our $1 million goal.
And I get to shoe.
Reb Beryl, you see what happens? You come to town and this news drops. That's what I was thinking when I said that you bring good mazel.
Anyway, whatever the excuses, my Baba and my mother always said misbagot in the hand.
That's 100% true.
Have a great Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you all. And,
What time is Shabbos tonight?
tonight,
Shul tonight.
Shul is 5 o'clock Mincha Erev Shabbos. So we'll start with Hodu and Patach Eliyahu. And around 5:10 we should be.
Candle lighting.
I have to check the exact. Show me, you know what time candle? 5:11. Candle lighting is 5:11. So we'll probably start Ashrei around 5:11, 5:10. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. mask minyan. 10 a.m. is an optional mask optional minyan. And don't forget to buy your Hanukkah stuff. It's coming up. Oh, and Sunday afternoon, evening, 4:30 on the Hollywood Beach Boardwalk. Around 4:30, sand sculpted menorah. 5:30, menorah lighting, followed by fireworks, entertainment, kosher food. You don't want to miss it, and I'm sure you won't. Spread the word if you think you know someone that would appreciate it too. And let the miracles begin.
Near Margaritaville.
It's just north of Margaritaville, yes. Reb Beryl, we met once or twice walking around that area.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can get there. Okay.
All right. Shkoyach, have a wonderful Shabbos.
Everybody. Good to be here. Have a great Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos doctor.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos doctor. Shabbos professor.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.